Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates to the 19th IISS Manama Dialogue. Let me begin by thanking His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the Crown Prince, the Deputy Supreme Commander and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, for a thought-provoking and excellent speech last night. The outcomes of the wars in Europe and the Middle East are likely to shape the global order for decades to come. The focus of this dialogue reflects the war in Israel and Palestine. The purpose of this dialogue, without seeking to assign to it too grandiose pretensions, it is to contribute in its own way to helping promote international peace and security. Very much in the spirit expressed so powerfully by His Royal Highness last night. I would like to thank His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and the government of the Kingdom of Bahrain for their tireless support for this dialogue and for the IISS presence in the Middle East. The research team here at the IISS, the office here in the Kingdom, in collaboration with colleagues from across all IISS offices, has produced a number of excellent studies on key issues of regional security, and I encourage you all to have a look if you haven't had a chance yet. We will now begin with our first plenary session. Let me remind everybody that these plenary sessions are on the record. This includes everybody who is asking a question, making a comment from the floor, so a degree of discipline is required from all. I will proceed by asking each of the speakers to give us their remarks from the podium in the order that they're listed in the program, and they will then return to their chair here on the panel. Once all of them have spoken, I will then take questions from the floor, and then we will finally come back to the panel to give everybody a chance to respond to those questions. To make this go smoothly as it can, let me point out the technical task that needs to be achieved. Every delegate in this room has a microphone. What you need to do to operate it is to put your badge, this badge here, into the microphone slot on the right-hand side of your microphone unit, and your name will then appear in front of you. And the second thing you need to do when you wish to take the floor, you press the microphone button. Your microphone will then turn green. That does not mean that it is on. I can turn your microphone on. You will appear here on the list of people who are seeking the floor, and I can turn your microphone on when I call on you, and then we'll move on to the next, and so on. So let us get to it. Sir John Chipman, Executive Chairman of the IISS, yesterday in his remarks suggested that strategy should be approached with a cool head and a warm heart. Let us see whether we can bring that approach to our first plenary session on war, diplomacy, and de-escalation, and it is a delight to ask the first speaker to take the floor, Ayman Safadi, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan. Sir, the floor is yours, and if I can invite you to deliver your remarks from the podium. Thank you, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning to you all, and let me start by thanking our brothers in the Kingdom of Bahrain and IISS for convening this summit at a time when all of us have to speak loud and clear about the catastrophe that the Israeli war is bringing, not just on Gaza, but on the region in general. This is not a time for mincing of words. This is a time to state facts as they are. This is not self-defense. This is a blatant aggression, the victims of which are innocent Palestinians. Over 11,000 Palestinians have been killed thus far, the majority of whom are children. Almost 67% of them are children. The humanitarian catastrophe resulting from this is beyond words. People crowding UNRWA shelters have no access to food or water. We're looking at the high possibility of a breakout of disease with no sanitation facilities, no medicine, with 61% of health infrastructure destroyed. In those shelters, there's one unit shower for every 700 Palestinian. There is one toilet for 160 Palestinian. The food, the medicine that has been allowed into Gaza since October 21st is less than 10% of the needs of Gazans under normal circumstances. This war is not taking us anywhere but towards more conflict and more suffering and the threat of expanding into regional wars. Israel says it wants to wipe out Hamas. There's a lot of military people here. I just do not understand how this objective can be realized. We look at facts on the ground again. The facts on the ground that most of those killed are civilians. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. The shelling, the attacks on Gazans is again destroying whole communities. 1.65 million Palestinians have been displaced. In percentage terms, that's about displacing 275 million Americans. 275 million Americans are the equivalent in percentage terms of the Palestinians who have been displaced. They're being told to leave the north to go to the south. Yesterday, you all saw the news, the south is being bombarded. So basically the message, we're not going to kill you in the north, we're going to kill you in the south. This got to stop. There's nothing that can justify the continuation of this brutality because it's not bringing security to Israel, it's not bringing peace to the region. We all condemned the killing of Israeli civilians on October 7. And we said we do so consistent with our common humanity, with our values, with international law. Nobody could justify the killing of civilians. None. And if I may refer to a speech made by His Majesty in Cairo not too long ago, His Majesty referred to the Al-Uhda Al-Amariya, the Pact of Umar, where Muslim soldiers, 1,000 years before Geneva, were marching to war under the instructions of don't kill a woman, don't kill a child, don't kill an elderly, and don't even cut a tree. So killing civilians is not part of any culture, any religion, any faith. And we stand very clearly, unequivocally against that. But what Israel is doing now is killing civilians. And not only is it not condemning the killing of civilians, it is killing them. And that has got to stop again because that's not going to take us anywhere. I can go into giving you lots of facts, lots of details. They'll all will point to one thing only. There is a catastrophe happening, a flagrant aggression. It's got to stop for the sake of the Palestinians, for the sake of Israelis, for the sake of the whole region to be able to live in peace. And again, putting things in context is important. The conflict, as many of you have heard a lot of people saying, did not start on October 7. There's a history to that. For years, we've been warning against the absence of political horizon. For years, we've been warning that the blockage of any horizon towards solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is going to drag us exactly into this moment. For years, we've been saying the fallacy of assuming that you can parachute over the Palestinian issue to create regional peace is wrong. It will only bring disaster. And here we are. Show me who's talking about any regional project at this point. Who's talking about integration? It's all about war. Because there is an occupation that has not ended, and there are no prospects of ending it. Gaza, I think you all can see what's happening in Gaza. However, there's very little attention being given to what's happening in the West Bank. Every day, there are 6 settlers' attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank. Every day. So far, over 200 Palestinians have been killed. The Armenian quarter in Jerusalem cannot be accused of being a Hamas hideout. Listen to what the Armenian community has been saying. 16th century existence is being threatened now by settlers who are going to that community, trying to destroy it, with the police watching and facilitating. And settlers are attacking Armenians with attack dogs day in, day out. Is this a war against Hamas? I think we've got to say facts as they are. This war has to stop and has to stop immediately. Civilians have a right to protection. Denial of food, medicine, fuel to Gazans is a war crime. We have to call it out as a war crime because it is. International law has to apply to all. The message that's being sent, given the fact that this war is continuing, Israel not listening to anybody despite the tremendous efforts that I know a lot of making, Israel is not abiding by international law. So what's the message here? Israel can do whatever it wants. That is the message that our people are seeing. That's what the whole world is seeing. Israel is above the law. General Assembly resolution calling it to allow humanitarian pauses. Did not listen. Security Council resolution, again, too late, but still a step in the right direction, urging Israel to stop for a humanitarian pause. It's not listening. Where do we go from here? And let me just be clear. Gaza alone, looking to the future, is not going to work. Looking at the conflict from a purely security prism, it's just going to make things worse. We've seen what that approach has done on the West Bank. So we will not entertain any idea of looking at Gaza alone. Let me be very clear. I know, speaking on behalf of Jordan, but having discussed this issue with almost all our Arab brethren, there'll be no Arab troops going to Gaza. None. We're not going to be seen as the enemy. And one very, very important thing, how could anybody talk about the future of Gaza when we do not know what kind of Gaza will be left once this aggression ends? So basically, by entertaining that, we're telling the Israeli government, do whatever you want. Go, destroy Gaza. Nobody is stopping you. And once you're done, we'll go clean your mess. No, we will not. If we want to talk about what should be done in Gaza in the future, we should stop the destruction of Gaza now. That is the message that we should all understand. The only way to move forward and secure the peace that has been a strategic choice for us, we've worked for decades for that. The Arab Peace Initiative goes back to 2002, where the offer was full peace, full normal ties and relations for ending occupation. It's not there. It has not been listened to. So we want strategic. We want peace as a strategic objective. We don't want our region to have to relive the horrors that are being imposed on it right now. But to do that, you're not going to be doing it by war. You're not going to do it by looking at Gaza, keeping Gaza as an open prison, besieged from every direction. The only way you do that is to end occupation, produce peace on the basis of the two-state solution that will allow all peoples of the region to live with dignity, to live with freedom, without the fear of being arrested at every corner or being shot at every turn. We've got to act, and we've got to act strong. Priorities for now, priority number one, stop this war. Stop this aggression, stop the killing of civilians, stop the killing of women and children. Priority number two, immediately allow for humanitarian supplies into Gaza. A whole population is being besieged, 2.3 million. How is this okay? It's just impossible to comprehend. Number three, once we do all of that, there's got to be an approach once and for all to end this conflict once and for all on the basis of the two-state solution that will fulfill the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood and will address Israel's security concern. That is the only way to go forward. Other than that, we'll be living this scenario year in, year out, just like we've been for many decades before. What will Gaza produce after this? Israel says again it's want to wipe out Hamas. I said it before and I say it again. Hamas is an idea. You cannot bomb an idea out of existence. You're not happy with what Hamas is doing, convince the Palestinian people that they have a future and that Hamas is standing between them and that future. Thus far, that argument has not been made. Reality has not shown that. Palestinian people have been left with nothing left to lose. On the West Bank, in Gaza. Are we not going to learn? We're facing a major challenge here. Another victim of the war is the environment of peace that took a lot of hard work for us to get to it. How can you convince any Jordanian, any Egyptian, any Arab, anybody now that negotiations are really going to work and that we can engage in regional integration projects? So killing the faith in the viability of negotiations as a path to peace is one outcome of this ugly war. Another victim, credibility of international law. The selective application of international law. And I will say it again. If any other country in the world has done a fragment of what Israel did, will be sanctions imposed on it from every corner of the world now. The whole world is telling Israel, even those who recognize it as self-defense, we don't recognize that, let me be clear. This is not self-defense, it cannot be justified as self-defense. But those who accept that are telling Israel to act within the realm of international law. It's not. So where do we go from there? Keep telling them to do it, they keep refusing to do it. What happens? People are being killed day in, day out. And then we're supposed to come and clean the mess after Israel. That's not going to happen. At least that's our position. What we want to do, what the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan wants to do with all our friends and partners, is to, once this war ends, once the suffering ends, to again look at how we can all work together, once and for all solve this conflict, and that conflict can only be solved if occupation ends and the rights of Palestinians to freedom are realized and statehood, and the rights of Israel's security are addressed. And that's why we're looking to work with all our partners. The US has a leading role to play in this effort. Nothing will move without a US leadership role, let's be honest about it, in terms of making the peace. We need our friends in Europe, and we in the region need to do our part. However, there are so many variables that we don't know as of yet. We don't know, again, what kind of Gaza will be left once this war ends. We don't know what kind of a political orientation is going to be prevailing within the Israeli government. And before I close, just one thing. What's happening now, the displacement of people, is consistent with what sitting Israeli ministers have been saying for years. Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, religious Zionism, parties, they've all for years been saying the only way to move forward is to kick the Palestinians out of their ancestral land and wipe the Palestinians out of the face of the earth. When it comes, just one little side, when it comes to displacement, I think we made our position very clear in Jordan. I think our brothers in Egypt have made that same position as well, very, very clear. We will never allow that to happen. In addition to it being a war crime that will be a direct threat to our national security, we'll do whatever it takes to stop it. I just want to close again by just one last sentence. I'm sorry if I took more time. I didn't have a watch to look at it. But I'll just say one thing. The priority now, before we talk about what's going to be done next, we have to stop this war. We have to stop the killing. And again, we need all to come together to produce the peace that we believe is the only path to ensuring security for Palestinians, for Israelis. Our position is every life matters, Palestinian, Israeli. We should do everything we can to stop the horrors that we see unfolding from happening again. The path to that is a just and lasting peace on the basis of the two-state solution. We stand ready to work with all our partners to make sure that this is achieved. Thank you so much.
Minister, thank you very much for the clarity of your position. If I may now invite our next speaker to take the floor, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Walid Al-Khareji. Please, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء. أصحاب السمو والمعالي.
Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Be the blessings of God be with you. I would like first of all to thank the Kingdom of Bahrain for the efforts that they have paid in organizing this forum and for its success, for their good hospitality. I would like as well to thank Dr. John Chipman, the Chief Executive of the IISS. It is a pleasure to be with you today, and I convey to you the salutations of the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and his wishes for the success of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, the Manama dialogue has always had a huge importance because it has enabled dialogue that highlights the most important issues related to regional security and to finding sustainable solutions. The title of this conference, which is War, Diplomacy and De-escalation, has a very important influence on what we need to do. In fact, this session of the Manama dialogue is taking place within this very important crisis that is touching this area. We are facing horrific crimes that are violating the international law. We are witnessing military aggressions leading to thousands of victims, a war that nobody will be gaining of, and the region will not, of course, get out of this without huge repercussions. In Palestine today, we are facing horrific events, barbaric violations against civilians, unarmed civilians, because of the huge escalation of the occupation forces of Israel and their violation of international laws and humanitarian values, disregarding the international calls, and they are bombarding vital facilities, neighborhoods full with civilians, hospitals, and different other civil facilities. We have always repeated that the civilians should not be attacked under no pretext. We have condemned the policy of forced displacement and mass sanctioning that is followed by Israel and the embargo against the Palestinian population. Such a war that is prolonged will be leading to a humanitarian crisis, an unjustified one that will be leading the region to a huge crisis, destabilizing the regional security and removing all possibility of peace. In fact, this crisis, since the start of this crisis, we have worked with all the allies and partners to mobilize the international community for it to play its role and to put an end to these repeated violations and to the cycle of violence, for the Palestinian population to be able to enjoy their least legitimate rights. But in fact, the latest events push us to really think of how to find a solution. In fact, the kingdom is calling upon the United Nations to impose a truce, a humanitarian pause, or a humanitarian truce as a first step that needs to be followed by a de-escalation and holding the Israeli Defense Forces accountable for what they have done and to work towards peace in the region. But in return, and thanks to the extraordinary common International Islamic Summit that is held in Riyadh, we are working towards a unified Islamic voice that would support the Palestinian population towards a just and sustainable peace in this region. In fact, the kingdom has worked in order to put an end to this slaughter and to find some solutions to get out of this crisis. We will go on mobilizing all these efforts in order to convey our message, to convey our priorities to the entire world, to reach an immediate ceasefire, to remove the blockades or the siege on Gaza, and to open the way for medical and humanitarian assistance, releasing the hostages and the detainees, and reviving the efforts of durable and fair peace, in fact, and comprehensive peace. In fact, this is reminding us of having to go again to a peace process that would give back the Palestinians their legitimate rights, for them to establish their state upon the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as their capital, based on the international resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. This is the only way to put an end to this conflict and to find a better future for the entire region, to live peace, stability, and security. Majesties, Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, we are facing this huge responsibility that is caused by this crisis and many others in this area, and to reduce these tensions that we are living, these tensions that are only leading to wars and destruction. And everybody knows the importance of this region and its vitality for the economy, international economy and trade. This means that security and peace in this region will have their repercussions beyond this region, or their crises and their conflicts will of course reverberate all over the world. In fact, such conflicts will have ramifications, namely adding and increasing violence and extremism, and having a fertile ground for more terrorism. Consequently, it is very important to work on solving these problems and treating them in a collective way by strengthening the international organizations for them to be able to put an end to the ramifications. At the end, I would like to reiterate the importance of an immediate ceasefire, stopping to killing the civilians and putting an end to this conflict in Palestine. We would like to call upon the international community to put an end to this war, to achieve the peace we are looking for a better future in this region that needs to live in security, peace, and prosperity. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace of God be with you.
Minister, thank you very much for your remarks. May I now invite Brett McGurk to take to the podium, the coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa in the U.S. National Security Council. Brett.
Thank you so much, Bastian. I want to thank His Highness King Hamad, Crown Prince Salman, the hospitality of the Bahraini people, and IISS, Sir John, for bringing us together at this important and extremely difficult moment. When I stood on this stage 1 year ago, I discussed the pillars of President Biden's policies in this region. The pillars being partnerships, diplomacy, de-escalation, deterrence, integration, and values. And these 5 principles have guided our approach to this region, from ending the war in Yemen to confronting Iranian aggression to setting the foundation ultimately for a more integrated, stable, peaceful, and prosperous region. They've also, frankly, guided our approach to the current crisis in Gaza, one that threatens to upend this more hopeful vision. In fact, it was partially the intent of Hamas and others on October 7th to upend a future of stability, integration, and peace, and they will not succeed. Since the earliest hours of October 7th, the United States of America has been focused on supporting our partners in this region and containing the conflict to Gaza, to Hamas, the terrorist group that started this, by slaughtering more than 1,000 people from over 30 countries, including 35 Americans, the worst violence against Jews since the Holocaust, taking hostage more than 200 innocent people, including toddlers, even babies, and their mothers. President Biden has made a dozen calls or so to Prime Minister Netanyahu, spoken regularly to regional leaders almost every day. I was on a call last night with him and the Emir of Qatar, to European G7 counterparts and others, again on a near daily basis. He visited Israel about a week after the crisis, the first wartime visit by a president to Israel in history. And all of us have been working tirelessly with counterparts, including those on this stage, to facilitate humanitarian assistance to those in need, secure the release of hostages, and it's important what the Crown Prince said last night, and I will repeat it in my remarks, which will lead to a sustained multi-day humanitarian pause and to begin setting conditions for the longer term. In longer term, there's no returning to October 6th. That's true for Israel, it's true for Palestinians. No country can live with the threats of terror like what we saw from Hamas unleashed on October 7th on their border. And at the same time, Palestinians deserve, need, and require safety and self-determination. As President Biden has said repeatedly, there is no durable way out of this crisis long term, except one that results ultimately in an Israel that is fully secure and the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that might seem impossible now, but it's not. And in fact, in the days before October 7th, we were engaged in intensive discussions with Saudi Arabia and Israel about the prospect for normalization between those two countries. With the Palestinians both a partner and at the center of the developing package deal, a transformative deal for the region, for the world, and for the Palestinians in the West Bank. This was not an end run around that issue. Quite the opposite. There would be no deal, as our Saudi friends have said, without that Palestinian component. And in this case, what was true before October 7th is even truer now. That central issue must be addressed, and as Hamas is degraded, we are determined to help address it. So allow me to speak to what we are doing right now, including literally at this very hour, and then look ahead beyond the crisis to where we aim to lead. Our immediate focus is on regional security, securing the release of hostages, including through humanitarian pauses, containing the conflict, and surging humanitarian assistance. Let me first focus on regional security, including Israel's security. The United States of America supports its friends, particularly when threatened or attacked. And in this case, our support when it comes to Israel's security is not just focused on threats from Hamas. It is not just Hamas. It is also, by necessity, focused on other threats, including Hezbollah, other terrorist groups backed by Iran, and Iran itself. And now, while supporting Israel in its defense, we have also been clear that Israel must comply with international humanitarian law, work to separate Hamas from the Palestinian population, even as Hamas embeds itself within that population, and I want to stress the difficulty of this challenge. In his public remarks in Tel Aviv, President Biden reflected on his own experience making wartime decisions. He said, "There are never clear choices. There are always costs. Leaders must be deliberate, ask hard questions, defining objectives and making ongoing, honest assessments about whether the path you're on will achieve them, continuous and ongoing. We will not tell another country how to grieve or how to protect itself, but as friends and partners, we will do our best and offer our best advice and counsel, an ongoing rigorous inquiry on how to achieve shared objectives for peace and security. This approach has guided our engagement with the Israelis on a daily basis, direct conversations about its objectives, whether they are being achieved, and at what cost. And we keep those discussions private, including where we agree and particularly where we disagree. But we have to keep in mind, and we do, that Hamas started this war. Hamas is living underground in tunnels, underneath civilian infrastructure, and underneath civilians. It's pledged since October 7th to repeat October 7th again and again. It's holding children as hostage, now going on 5 weeks. And in the words of its own leaders, it has no regard for the people of Gaza, the innocent lives now caught up in this war. If Hamas wanted to protect the people of Gaza, it could release the hostages, surrender the leaders and those responsible for October 7th. Let me turn to that, briefly to the hostages. And it was very important, I thought, what His Royal Highness said last night. The United States continues to work on efforts to reunite hostages held by Hamas with their families where they belong. It's a top priority for the President, who has spoken with families of U.S. citizens who are still being held. He spoke to the issue 3 nights ago with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and as I mentioned just last night, with the Emir of Qatar. I will not discuss the details of those discussions here, but they have been intensive and ongoing. The track we have pursued led to the release of 2 Americans, a mother and a daughter, which was a pilot for what we hope will be a much larger release. Now, such a release of large number of hostages would result in a significant pause in fighting, and a massive surge of humanitarian relief. Hundreds and hundreds of trucks on a sustained basis entering Gaza from Egypt. And I have to say, Hamas from the earliest days has said, if you want the hostages returned, we need fuel, more humanitarian supplies. That's the bargain they set. But this is the pathway to a pause in the fighting, the release of hostages. And it's also reasonable to pause the fighting, release the hostages, the women, the children, the toddlers, the babies, all of them. And the onus here is on Hamas. This is the path. Simply calling for a ceasefire is not a path to peace. Imagine if someone took your family members and then told you to get them back, you had to give them X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be, and you were being advised, just give them X, Y, and Z anyway, without any promise that your family members would be released. That would be problematic. And that's where we've been. And yet we have been working to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, increasingly. But the surge in humanitarian relief, the surge in fuel, the pause in fighting will come when hostages are released. Speaking of humanitarian relief, we are working to significantly increase assistance into Gaza. And everybody working on this feels the pain and the emotion that Ayman laid out. Everyone, every day. It is horrific. It is intolerable, as the Crown Prince said yesterday. And we are leading efforts to increase the flow of life-saving, sustained humanitarian assistance. At the beginning of the crisis, of course, there were no border crossings into Gaza, and it was through our engagements that humanitarian aid began to transit through Rafah from Egypt. President Biden's visit to Israel opened the door to assistance. His direct conversations with President Sisi finalized the deal to finally get trucks moving from Egypt into Gaza. David Satterfield, our humanitarian coordinator on the ground, I just saw him the other day in Israel, working every day to surge as much support as possible. There are now approximately 100 trucks a day entering Gaza loaded with assistance, but it is not enough. Nobody says it's enough. And we aim to double that amount as soon as possible and then see it grow exponentially from there. But I want to just stress, the hostages are released, you will see a significant change. We have also committed $100 million for these efforts. We have a $14 billion supplemental package before the Congress, which is indeed focused on defense needs for Israel against the myriad of threats it faces, but also a significant portion for humanitarian assistance for Palestinians and the people of Gaza. This has been matched by $100 million from the GCC, $100 million from the EU, which is welcome. And the United States is the largest supporter of UNRWA. Support the Biden administration restored 2 years ago after it was cut entirely by the last administration, and UNRWA remains the only reliable distribution network in Gaza. There's no alternative, and this vital support from us will continue, and we call on others who express concern about the situation to do the same. Let me talk about containing the conflict to Gaza and to Hamas. The president has said clearly, repeatedly, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, don't. We're now 5 weeks into this conflict, and the fears of the expanding conflict from the earliest days so far have not materialized. And at this conference last year, you heard myself and other American speakers speak about integrated air defense networks. Those networks were being established. The concept of dynamic force deployment, which a year ago was a concept in our national defense strategy. Ensuring that the United States can respond here in this region on a moment's notice, even without standing fixed forces in the hundreds of thousands as we used to have. And recent weeks have proved the case. Integrated air defense networks developed over years of painstaking work through CENTCOM and our partners throughout this region have destroyed dozens of missiles and UAVs, including missiles launched from Yemen, destroyed on the edge of outer space. The Forward Carrier Strike Group, led by the largest aircraft carrier in the world, with an embarked air wing accompanied by cruisers and destroyers, is now in the Gulf, with another carrier strike group, the Eisenhower, anchored in the Eastern Med. We've moved additional air defense, air assets, to supplement the defenses we've already had. The intent here is not to escalate the situation, but precisely the opposite, to deter and to prevent, while also being fully prepared for whatever may come, particularly to defend our personnel and interests, and prepared we are. Let me turn finally to a look ahead, to what can come after the crisis. And I don't necessarily agree that until the fighting stops entirely, we really can't focus on these fundamental questions. It's important, I think, to ask how we can work together now to ensure, against the desired and stated wishes of Hamas, that this can never, ever happen again. And this will require significant security reassurance for Israel. That is fundamental. And it will require a new and reinvigorated process for a long-term and durable peace. And we frame our diplomacy with that in mind. I hearken back again last night to the Crown Prince's remarks, because he referenced, very importantly, Secretary Blinken's comments in Tokyo at the G7, where he set forth principles that guide our approach. They've become known as the Tokyo Principles. That was not the intent, but I think that's a good way to phrase them. In the near term, the United States insists and will work to ensure the following with respect to Gaza. First, there must be no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Second, there must be no reoccupation of Gaza. Third, there must be no reduction of the territory of Gaza. This is Palestinian land, and it must remain Palestinian land. Fourth, Gaza must not be used as a platform for terrorism or other violent acts. That means no threats to Israel from Gaza. Finally, there must be no besiegement of Gaza. The innocent people of Gaza must be separated from Hamas. They are not responsible for its crimes. For the medium and longer term, even in the midst of this crisis, we must plan now and prepare now. Not tomorrow or when the fighting stops, but right now. So our 5 no's: no forced displacement, no reoccupation, no reduction in territory, no threats to Israel, no besiegement, followed by 5 affirmative and forward-looking principles. First, the Palestinian people and their voices and aspirations must be at the center of post-crisis governance in Gaza. Second, the West Bank and Gaza must return to unified governance, ultimately under a revitalized Palestinian Authority, and be incorporated into a future Palestinian state, an impediment which has been in place since 2006. We need to overcome that, and I think we can. Third, Israel must be secure. Terrorist groups and threats to Israel cannot be permitted to emanate and metastasize from the West Bank or from Gaza. I do agree with Ayman. There's a significant role here for Israel when it comes to the West Bank, something we've been speaking very directly to and very publicly to. Fourth, resources must be provided, and we must prepare now to support the post-crisis phase in Gaza, to include interim security resources as necessary within the paradigm that we've laid out. It is not simply about cleaning up after the war. It is about setting the foundation for the path that we just laid out, ultimately a path to 2 states. Fifth, a reconstruction mechanism must be established to ensure the needs of Gazans are met on a long-term and sustainable basis. We have done this before as a global community. We can do it again. And if we seek to forge a path out of this crisis towards Israelis and Palestinians ultimately living side by side in 2 states with equal measures of security, freedom, opportunity, and dignity, these principles are essential. And even where we might disagree on the immediate term, we can help guide all of us as we seek to forge the way out of this crisis and towards a better future, a Middle East at peace, increasingly integrated, stable, prosperous, and secure. And I'll just conclude with an observation. I think it's fair to say, when you come to this conference every year, that those in this room who attend every year, IISS, my colleagues on this panel, I think it's fair to say you're the builders. You seek a different way to build new connections, a better future for all of us, and particularly for this most important region. Hamas, ISIS, the Iranian-backed militias launching missiles and drones every other year or so, that is a main focus, one of them. They're the destroyers. They offer nothing for the people they claim to represent. I just have to 2 seconds here. It's important, because this is how we see this. But President Biden is a builder. He's a builder at home, with historic investments in our own growth and infrastructure and abroad with our friends, partners, and allies. And over the years alone in this region, the last year, we have built coalitions, increased shared prosperity. The India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor announced at the G20 in New Delhi, the CCPA agreement with Bahrain, historic agreements here in the Gulf in the areas of advanced tech, artificial technology, space exploration, climate, clean energy, global investments, and ports, essential minerals, resources that will define the future. That remains our affirmative agenda, building a new Middle East integrated within the region and from the region outwards to the world. But out of this crisis, importantly, we are determined to build lasting security for Israel and a durable, real peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It's not only possible, but it's essential. And I think this crisis is a galvanizing event that can actually get us there. And we as the United States are fully prepared, as Ayman said, to do our part. And we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement and for outlining.
شكرا.
May I now ask the EU's High Representative for Foreign Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell, to take the floor. And while he is making his way to the podium, just a reminder, do insert your badge if you're seeking the floor. We started the session a little bit late because of previous commitments from some of the speakers, so we'll take a little bit of the time of the coffee break to answer questions.
Thank you.
Borrell.
Thank you. Let me first thank you for your invitation. The Manama Forum is the place to be here, in particular in these challenging times. Happy to be here in Bahrain, which means between two seas, and this goes beyond geography. Bahrain is a country between different forces, different traditions, a country that plays a moderating role in this region, a role that is much needed and much appreciated in this time of extreme polarization, because the rise of emotional polarization and the gap between peoples and governments is one of the most important challenges of our time. A country that is a beacon in the region and in the world. So thank you very much to the Manama Forum and to the authorities of Bahrain for hosting us. I want to pay tribute to His Excellency, the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who took a bold step beyond the official position of Arab partners last night, condemning both sides of the conflict, Hamas and Israel, for what has resulted a tremendous loss of human lives, livelihood, and hope on a better future. We have to move from war to peace, to de-escalation. And for that we have diplomacy. Diplomacy is the tool, the most valuable instrument. But we are far from getting results. I'm trying to talk with my mind and my heart also, because I am coming from Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Ramallah, and one has to be able to say the same things everywhere. It would be easy here to get your applause, but if my words have to have meaning, they have to be the same when I am talking to the Israelis face to face, when I am talking to the families of the people being kidnapped, when I am talking to the victims, the families of the victims in the kibbutz, and when I am thinking on the families of the people being killed in Gaza. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy to represent here the European Union. Last year it was much easier. It was just necessary to blame Iran to get you being applauded. Today, is it going to be a little bit more difficult? I know. But I will face this challenge, honestly. And I think that there are two dimensions. First, humanitarian, or if you want to call it, the way the war is being conducted by Israel in Gaza. And from this point of view, I am fully agreeing with you, Minister Safadi, on the data that you have been provided about the number of casualties. I am not going to repeat them. The suffering of civilian populations will only increase if we are not able to stop this. And we are working on this. We have increased our humanitarian aid, and certainly we have to do more. But it doesn't make any sense to give me a dinner tonight if you are going to kill me tomorrow. So yes, humanitarian support is needed, but what is more needed is to stop the causes that humanitarian need is needed. And the second one is the political stage. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, I met the United Nations agencies. They painted a dire picture. They know how the situation is running in Gaza. And when you go and you visit the kibbutz and you see what's happening there, you can only think one thing. One horror doesn't justify another horror. And after the humanitarian stage, there will be unavoidably a political stage. And the end game is well known. It's the two-state solution. However, I hesitate to talk about it. Not because I don't believe in it, because I don't see any other solution. I hesitate because we have been repeating once and again for 30 years two-state solutions. Since Oslo time, 30 years ago. Two-state solution, two-state solution, two-state solution, and doing nothing, or almost nothing, to implement it. And I think that on repeating and repeating two-state solution while doing nothing to implement it, we have been given tactical coverage to the strategy of expanding settlers in the West Bank. In Oslo time, there were X, now there are 4 times X, 4 times more settlers. And the Palestinian territory has been reduced to an archipelago of small pieces of land not interconnected among them, which makes much more difficult the two-state solution that we are preaching. That's why 6 months ago, I just started working with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and the Arab League in a very, very enthusiastic way to try to revive this process, to take that in the center of the stage, because it's a fallacy that we could solve the problem in the region just by making agreements between the Arab states and the State of Israel, forgetting about the Palestinians. They are there, and they have to be taken into account, and there have to be also peace between Israel and Palestine. Otherwise, it will not be peace or no security in the region and in the world. And I think that the Europeans and the Arabs have a particular responsibility to engage more on looking for a solution. However, what saddened me is that this mantra that has been repeated once and again, maybe it was a way of washing our hands and keep them clear. And we have never delivered it. Therefore, talking about the two-state solution without defining the progressive and provisional steps to get there, which can one day lead to it, is not useful. And this is an occasion, maybe it's a wake-up call for the international community in order to take that seriously. And that's why I've been talking about some way of getting out of that, which I was in Tokyo also, discussing with my friend Secretary Blinken and others. And certainly, there are some red lines that we have to define. And these red lines are no reoccupation of the forced displacement of population. Well, but when you say forced displacement of population, think about it. If you are being bombed and starved, you will displace. This is forced displacement of population. We mean not forced displacement of population out of Gaza, because Gaza is a Palestinian territory that should remain a Palestinian territory. So no separation of the territory of Gaza from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. There are no 3 Palestinian territories. There are 1 Palestinian territory. So no reduction of the territory of Gaza. Certainly not return to the status quo. No more terrorist attacks can be launched from Gaza against Israel. And this means that Hamas cannot be in control of Gaza any longer. So who will be in control of Gaza? I think only one could do that, the Palestinian Authority. I was in Ramallah. They told me that they are ready and willing to take this responsibility. In fact, right now, the schools, the hospitals, the public services in Gaza are being run by the Palestinian Authority. They are paying for it. And there are tens of thousands of staff people from the Palestinian Authority serving the people in Gaza. But they will need international support. It's not a matter of replacing them. It's a matter of supporting and helping them. And this will require a strong involvement of the Arab countries in the economic and political reconstruction of Gaza, not only the physical reconstruction of Gaza. I was in Gaza in 2008, after the first bombing of the city. And since then, we have reconstructed Gaza physically 4 times. It's not a matter of rebuilding the buildings. It's a matter of building a state, a statehood. And the Arab countries need to take their political responsibilities, particularly those among you that have a good relation with Israel and also being trusted by the Palestinian Authority. I think that Egypt and Jordan have a crucial role to play now, but also Saudi Arabia and all of you. And finally, we, the European Union, we too, we have to engage more on looking for a solution. We all need peace between Israelis and Palestinians more than ever, because never has the polarization between the North and the South and within our societies as much alarming as it is today. Thousands of anti-Semitic acts are being deployed in the Western societies. This has to be fight. Yes, Israel deserves security, and the Palestinians deserve dignity. Yes, Israel deserves security, and the Palestinians in the West Bank too deserve security. More than 400 of them has been killed since the beginning of the year. So I said clearly in the kibbutz, I said clearly in Ramallah, everywhere, one horror doesn't justify another. And enduring peace and security cannot be delivered without a political process. People have not responsibilities for the crime that were committed in the kibbutz, don't have to pay for it. Peace has never seemed too far away. But maybe this is an opportunity that we cannot miss. As my friend Shimon Peres told me once, war is not inevitable. Peace is inevitable. And as a European, I can attest you that this is true. Peace is possible. The only question is, how many innocent lives will need to be lost until we get this realization? This lies in our hand. Let's work for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Representative. Thank you very much. We will go straight into questions. I'll take a group of 8 or so to collect a number of points, and then we will return to the panel for a final round of answers. And the first on my list is Mina Al-Oraibi from the UAE. Your microphone is on now.
Thank you very much. My question is to Mr. Brett McGurk. Do you believe Israel should heed to the UN Security Council resolution that was just passed and to the UN General Assembly resolution also?
Thank you very much. And the next on my list is one of our young leader delegates, Sheikh Sabah Al-Sabah from Kuwait. Your microphone is on.
Thank you. My question as well is to Mr. McGurk. You were a special envoy for the Global Coalition to counter ISIL. You built a formal alliance of 62 nations that was formed to support Iraq under Prime Minister Abadi to fight ISIL along 5 military and diplomatic lines of effort. Indeed, a multinational formation, the Combined Joint Task Force, OIR, which was in my country, Kuwait, was stood up to degrade and destroy ISIS in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. As we're seeing the increasing conflation of Hamas with ISIS, as many Israelis promulgate the hashtag Hamas is ISIS, indeed, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, Hamas is ISIS and ISIS is Hamas. Your remarks just a few moments ago, you mentioned Hamas and ISIS in the same breath, saying every year it's one or the other. My question is, given this, will you seek to build a similar coalition to combat Hamas and stand up a similar combined joint task force? If so, how do you think the membership will look like and how successful will it be? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next on my list, Hassan Al-Hassan from Bahrain and the IISS.
Thank you very much. I have two questions for Mr. McGurk. The first one is to seek clarification on the US position. Is it the case that the US does not support a multi-day pause in the fighting unless and until Hamas releases all of the hostages in its custody? Is that the US case? Is that the US position at the moment? And my second question pertains to Iran. So the Islamic resistance in Iraq, quote unquote, according to the Institute for the Study of War, has claimed 81 attacks against US bases in Iraq and Syria since October 7. The US, according to press reports, has conducted 3 rounds of retaliatory strikes. Do you agree with the assessment that US deterrence of Iran below the threshold of open war has all but failed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's try and limit it to one question each, please, so that we can bring as many people in as possible. Ragida Derham from the US.
Yes, sorry, but again, it's to Brett McGurk. Hello, Brett. Do you believe, obviously, that your deterrence worked with Iran and Hezbollah because there has been no expansion of the war and because you see the positions of, the stated positions of Iranians saying we are not going to engage together with Hamas in this war? What guarantees you have that this is not only transitional? You use the carrot and the stick approach. Can you tell us a bit about the carrots? We saw the stick, but we want to know more about the carrots. And are you willing to use your leverage with the Israelis, Brett, in order to make sure that they don't drag the United States intentionally into a wider war because it may be an opportunity, a political opportunity for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Beckett from the UK.
It's really a question for Joseph Borrell and raised by Ayman Safadi about sanctions. Brett McGurk spoke about a revitalized Palestinian Authority. The team in place is really the team that has to be dealt with. We had rather hoped that Riyad al-Malki would come to this dialogue and speak. As far as I understand, his freedom of movement was denied by Israel. So, moreover, Israel says that it must re-securitize the Gaza after this conflict. If Israel won't allow the Palestinian Authority to speak in public and disregards what President Biden said about what happens next in Gaza, when is the time to start applying sanctions on Israel?
Tom, thank you very much. Can I please turn to Shafi Al-Damar from Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Bastian. According to the Realist School of International Relations, we are living in a world of anarchy. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. In fact, Israel today is putting the famous philosophy of Nicola Machiavelli in practice, ruthless approach to achieving their objective. My question thank you, Joseph, for the statement today and yesterday, but also my question to you and to your American or US colleague, when are we going to see a real and strong pressure from Europe and perhaps from United States of America on Israel to adhere to international law, including the protection of civilians? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take a few more and then we'll return to the panel. Vivian Naraim from the US. Microphone is on.
Thank you. My question is for Brett McGurk. Is the U.S. still keen on pursuing further normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states? And if so, are you at all concerned about the swell of popular opposition to normalization across the region, including here in Bahrain, where many people are calling not only to stop further normalization, but to cancel the existing normalization agreement and roll back the Abraham Accords?
Thank you very much. And from the Republic of Korea, Chung Min Lee.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is to Minister Safadi and Deputy Minister El Khawaji. I understand the humanitarian concerns that everybody in this room has over the Palestinians, but you did not mention a single word, Minister Safadi, on why Iran continues to support the most vicious terrorist group in the world, Hamas, Hezbollah, and even the Houthis. What has your country done, or including Saudi Arabia and other GCC states, to stem, mitigate, and deter Iran's support of these vicious groups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take two more. Ebtesam Al-Kebbi from the UAE.
Thank you. I join the others because the United States is a superpower. So my question for Brett McGurk, for sure, the war in Gaza was a strategic shock. But why? Because it brought United States back to the Middle East, but in a heavy militarization, which also the Chinese pointed to that, which did not happen in Iraq and Libya. So this heavy military in the region, is it really for Hamas? Is it beyond Hamas? Or is it to compete with China and Russia? Russia and Iran was the losers from normalization, from IMEC, and those losers, of course, they will retaliate by supporting Hamas or trigger this kind of war. And this war also will trigger more jihadists are coming, this time not for Afghanistan. Even if you finish Gaza, there is jihadists for Gaza. The second question, what scenario for Gaza you are putting if this war is going to continue? And what if Palestinians, they are not accepting PA and Abbas? What you are going to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final intervention from Robert Ward, please.
Thank you, Bastian. Brett McGurk referenced the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor agreed at the September G20 between the region's most important economic powers, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as well as the EU and India. It's planned to traverse the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel, and in President Biden's word, it's designed to contribute to a more stable and prosperous Middle East. Given the increased geopolitical tensions in the region and the difficulties of diplomatic regional coordination now, does the panel feel that the corridor has a viable future?
Thank you very much. So we will take 10-12 minutes from the coffee break to just get responses to those 10 interventions from the floor. Thank you very much for those. We'll go in reverse order, and if I can ask panelists to be selective on the questions that you've been asked, engage with those so that we can wrap up in about 10 minutes from now. High Representative, if I can ask you to perhaps respond to the points that have been put to you.
Well, I've been the last questions addressed to me. But it's clear that, you know, the European Union represents 27 different states. You know that at the United Nations we voted in 3 different ways. Someone supporting the Arab proposition, others opposing, and others abstaining, which shows that there is a wide range of sensitivity. We are united, all of us, on the rejection of the terrorist attack against Israel, and on asking Israel to not being driven by rage on the answer. I am not a lawyer. I cannot say if there is a break of international law or not, but I think that to deprive a civil population of the basic services of water, food, medicines, everything, is something that it looks like being against international law. And looking at what the one who knows about it, who is the special envoy of the United Nations for this issue, he considered several times that the high level of civilian casualties and the wide scale of destruction of civilian infrastructure raises serious concerns about the proportion of the attacks of Israel trying to defend against Hamas. And this will be, even the International Criminal Court has been sending opinions about it. Investigation will go. It's not to me to define which is exactly the legal qualification of these events, but it's obvious that it raises serious concerns about the way Israel is performing their right to defend. And once again, what we have already saying from Europe and also from the US, that the best friend of Israel is the one who tell them not to be driven by rage and understand that the answer to this awful terrorist attack they have been suffering will determine also the next steps on the peace process. And about the hostages, it's obviously that the hostages has to be delivered. It's almost not necessary to say that, but yes, let's say once and again. I had spent 4 hours with the families of the hostages. So it's quite understandable that without the freedom of the hostages, nothing can be solved.
Thank you very much. Brett, you had a whole range of questions. If you can take maybe 3 minutes to give us a response.
Mina's question on the pause, which I think I got 2 questions on, was, yeah, we support humanitarian pauses. In fact, that resolution is something we worked on in a very painstaking way in New York. We did not vote for it because it doesn't not even condemn Hamas. And to vote for a resolution, I think it's a principle of ours, at the very least, condemn Hamas. What you just said is very important, release the hostages. Not everybody says that, release the hostages. But that gets to the pathway to a multi-day pause, where we are right now, is release the hostages, the mothers, the children, the toddlers and babies. And that's a very active discussion. Hamas and ISIS, we have drawn the comparison in terms of tactics. I drew the comparison here in terms of if you come here every year for 10 years. 10 years ago, we're talking about ISIS. I think we did galvanize an international coalition and a collective effort. Hamas is a different problem, clearly. But I do think this moment in this crisis, and I'm not talking about the security phase, I'm talking about what comes next. We need to be focused now, and we are, and I think it's very important for what comes next so we can ensure this can't happen again. Questions about Iran and how we balance escalation versus deterrence, everything else we're doing. I'm not going to reveal everything here. It is an equation that is inexact. It is something we look at every single day. We are prepared here for all possible contingencies. And the question I got about the military deployments to this region, they seem, when you're talking about Hamas, but it's not just Hamas. We did not deploy carrier strike groups because of Hamas. We deployed carrier strike groups because of the threats coming from Iran and many of its proxy groups. And in fact, we had a cruiser-destroyer in the Red Sea, not by happenstance, but when the Houthis launched multiple, almost 30 ballistic missiles and UAVs, we believe at Israel, all of which our cruiser-destroyers shot down. That is why we deployed our military assets here, and it was the right move, and they're going to stay here as we work our way out of this crisis. Normalization, I think I spoke to it. Look, we are in the middle of a major crisis. This is our priority focus. It has been for the last 5 weeks. It will continue to be. But that broader agenda of integration, I have been in every capital in this region. I was just in Ramallah. I was just in Israel. I was in Saudi Arabia, UAE. I'm here in Manama. I'll be in Doha tonight. I'll be in Cairo tomorrow. I'll be in Amman tomorrow. That broader agenda of where we want to head, ultimately, is an affirmative agenda that is broadly shared. But clearly, we have to focus now on the here and now and getting out of the crisis. But very much so, that affirmative agenda, we cannot allow what Hamas did on October 7th to knock that permanently off path, and we're determined not to let that happen.
Brett, thank you very much. Deputy Foreign Minister, if I can ask you to perhaps pick up also on the point with regards to Iran, but also there was a question about the economic corridor and any other issue you would like to pick up on.
Thank you. Concerning Iran, I think the strategy of Saudi Arabia for a stable region was very obvious. So later on, we restore our relation with the Iranian, and I think this would send a good sign to mitigate Iranian influence in somewhere in the region and have more stable region for the whole. Concerning the economical corridor, I think this idea was initiated soon, so we will have to give a chance, to see the outcome of it. We in Saudi Arabia think that we should not mix politics with economy. Economy is an economy, and things that are viable and vital for us, we will continue work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Safadi, please.
Thank you so much. Allow me first to say a couple of words on the issue of hostages. I think it's been very, very clear from day number one that we all have urged the release of civilians. The Arab League meeting, ministerial meeting, which took place within days from the October 7, we all urged the release of civilians. So that is a standard, that's a solid position, and we all know that a lot of work is being done to do that. But I just don't find it acceptable that Israel links a humanitarian pause to the release of hostages. The release of hostages, again, we all support it. There's a lot of negotiations. But Israel is taking 2.3 million Palestinians hostage in the process by denying them food and water and by this war. So yes to the release of hostages, but no to linking humanitarian pauses to the release of hostages, because the impact of that, the consequences of that, is starving 2.3 million Palestinians. Yesterday, the day before, at the Foreign Ministry in Jordan, we were getting calls from all over, including from someone called Dr. Nahid Saba, a Gazan Christian, pleading with us that his mother and 400 other people are being held hostage at a Latin monastery in Gaza. He's saying they don't have water, they don't have food, and he was asking if we could take them to our hospital, which is 4 kilometers away, which we said we'd gladly do, but we have no means because Israelis are shooting at everybody who's moving. So I think that's a reality that we need to understand. Our own hospital came under attack. 7 of our people our hospital has been in Gaza since 2009. 7 of our military medical staff were wounded. We did not have a Hamas tunnel under our hospital, nor does the Latin monastery in Gaza that has a Hamas tunnel. So we gotta be, quite honest about how things are evolving in Gaza there. We've seen what happened at Al-Shifa, how many people, how many babies were off the incubators because of the siege, and the whole of Gaza is besieged. Let me just say also to our colleague from Korea, be careful with sort of characterizations that are not anchored in reality. I mean, it's so easy to speak in black and white and throw characterizations. No, you cannot compare Hamas to ISIS. We all condemn the killing on October 7. But those broader characterizations seem to ignore the fact that Hamas did not create the conflict. The conflict created Hamas. Why is Hamas there? Because there continues to be an occupation that's denying Palestinian people their right. We in Jordan and all of us in the Arab world have always said negotiations are the path to peace. None of us endorsed violence. But reality is negotiations have not produced peace. And Israel continues to occupy Palestinian territories and continues to consolidate Palestinian territories. Mr. Magek and I were in the same room when we had the Aqaba Sharm meetings. We had small steps that we agreed on. Steps that would just release some funds for the Palestinians to be able to put food on the table, among some other measures that would have created some calm. Israel signed this document in Aqaba. A month later, it implemented nothing. We met in Sharm el-Sheikh. We again reiterated the need for those measures to be implemented. Israel did not implement. Israeli politicians are saying they want to suffocate the Palestinian people's aspirations for statehood. So let's look at the broader sort of environment. Again, what we did in Jordan, we've been doing a lot for decades. We've signed a peace treaty with Israel 30 years ago almost. And that peace treaty was signed within the context of a collective Arab approach after Oslo Accords were signed to get to a comprehensive regional peace. People forget that Oslo Accords were signed as a transitional period for 4 to 5 years, after which a Palestinian state should have emerged. Israel did not honor that. Meanwhile, I think as Joseph said, number of settlements have increased by 400% on the West Bank. So again, let's put things in context. This conflict did not begin on October 7. This conflict will continue to haunt the region unless the root cause of this conflict, which is occupation, ends. And we all have been working together. The US has been supporting the two-state solution. Europe has been supporting the two-state solution. All of us in the Arab world have been supporting the two-state solution. Why don't we have a two-state solution? Because Israel does not want to have a two-state solution. And if it's not a two-state solution, then what it is? It is continued conflict. It is a reality of apartheid, because a one-state reality will not solve the conflict, and we'll find ourselves here and there in the same spot. So I'm telling you that what Jordan wants is a comprehensive, just and lasting peace that will give the Palestinians their rights and that will ensure the security of Israelis. We're not taking side on who has the right to peace or not. Everybody has a right to peace. Palestinians have a right to peace. Israelis have a right to peace. But let's be honest about it. Israel will not have security until Palestinians have security. The whole region will not have security until this conflict is solved. What we're working for, what we've been working for, is to create conditions that would take us towards that peace, that will make sure every Palestinian, Israeli live in peace. That is what I've been working for, and that's what we've been trying to do. And I think the only way we can move forward and make sure this doesn't happen again is to go back to the drawing board and say, why are we here? And the answer is simple: occupation that has no prospects of ending, and then work together to end that so that Palestinians and Israelis share the land, and as His Majesty said not too long ago, so that there's peace and two states between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. Without that, let's not fool ourselves. We're going to be in this over and over and over again. And just one point, if I may, last point on Gaza. Again, Israel is creating an ugly reality in Gaza. We cannot just wait until it's done with creating that reality and then come and say, let's fix it. I think what we need to do is to come in now and very strongly and stop Israel from creating the misery that Gaza is definitely is actually, and the worst misery that's going to be when the war stops. So what we're saying, the priority now must be on stopping the war if we are going to know what we're dealing with. But just like allowing somebody to come here with a torch and torching the whole place, and we're all watching, and once they're done, we'll say, thank you so much, now let's put the fire out. That's not how we're going to work.
Minister, thank you very much.